again, everybody. Welcome back to our booth in Tackletown at the 63rd Annual Ford Indianapolis Boat Sport and Travel Show. Our first guest of the day is John Van Hal of Van Hal Custom Woodstrip Canoes. John, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
John may look familiar if you've been on Wild Indiana or Wild Indiana's YouTube channel. We did a video with him last year out here at the Ford Indianapolis Boat Sport and Travel Show, and it was really interesting to talk about custom woodstrip canoes. I think one of the first things that we were discussing was probably every person that's ever been a paddler at some point has thought about trying to build a woodstrip canoe. So you've actually done that. How did you get started by doing this?
Well, when I was young, I was raised up in Minnesota on the lake. Right, we had a place right on the lake, and my father took us out fishing all the time and overfished us. And I finally got tired of that. But I love boats, and I love wooden boats. And I started reading even at 12 years old, 13. I've collected a number of books. And finally, when I was around 14 years old, I bought my first canoe. It was a fiberglass canoe, and used it. Loved canoeing, the freedom it gives you, and there's just no end to possibilities when you start out there, and it's just quiet.
Yeah.
So I started in that, and as I got older, I loved woodworking. And like you said, I started thinking in my head, putting those two together, wood canoe.
Yeah.
And a family come along, and that all takes your time. Around 1986, I had 2 children and my wife. I think the children were around 2 and 4. And I started my first woodstrip canoe and built it out of redwood. Loved the process, loved doing it. It takes a big hunk of time and a big piece of room in your house, in my garage, and a lot of sawdust. But it was very enjoyable. I really enjoyed it, and I thought, as I was doing it, I would like to do this again.
Yeah.
So it wasn't long after I finished that first one that I built another one. And again, it was just for myself. And after I finished that one, I thought, well, I'd like to do another one. So I did. I set up and I built.
The madness descended.
Oh, and my wife is, wondering more and more what's going on here.
How many canoes do you need, honey?
Yeah, that's right. So I did my third one. And then I held off for a few years and started collecting more and more information. And then as I got closer to retirement, I decided to start a business. And so I did about 10 years ago. And 8 years ago, I went into it full time. I wouldn't recommend anybody go into it to make a living from. There's just not enough money there for it. But I just really enjoy it. And my shop is so nice and close. My wife will often go to bed, and I'll sneak back out to the shop and work out there for an hour or two before I go to bed. And it's just something I enjoy.
Well, we're going to get into a little bit more technical end, but I had a question right off the bat. You said you made the canoe out of redwood. I always think of them as a cedar strip canoe. Apparently, you can use other stuff besides cedar.
You can. My first one was redwood. I had collected the redwood from a specific source, but all my others are western red cedar. And cedar is just a little bit lighter than redwood. It's not quite as it's a little bit softer, but it still does the job.
So I've read a couple of books, so I'm a correspondence school expert on this topic.
Okay.
I've never built one. Can you walk folks through the basic process of how one of these things come together?
Yes. You first build. First, you get a book, a couple of books. They weren't available when I started, and there was a lot of learning to it. But you start off with what's called a strong back, and basically it's about 2 feet shorter than the length of your canoe. And you bolt that thing to the floor, and it'll be up off of the floor about 2.5, 3 feet. And then you build forms on that out of 3/4 inch plywood, and there'll be, let's say on a 17-foot canoe, there'll be approximately 13 forms that'll go across the length of that canoe. And then the strips that I strip out of boards on a bandsaw, and then I run through a router and put a bead and a cove on. And then they are glued up one at a time on that form. I use staples to hold them there temporarily while the glue is drying. And then after that's all finished, glued up, it looks pretty rough.
Yeah.
And I pull all those staples out, sand it down,
Pull all of those staples out.
Yeah, around 1,200 staples.
Oh, my.
Yeah, and then sand that down. And down, I bring it down to around 180 grit. And then once you have it sanded and cleaned and all your you'll have a few gaps to get those filled. Not too many, but a few. And then I take and put fiberglass cloth over it, epoxy over that, 3 coats of epoxy on the outside. On the inside, I just a cloth and 1 layer of epoxy.
Oh.
And then after that's cures, then you sand that down and varnish. And I'll put 7 coats or thereabouts on the outside and the inside of a spar urethane varnish.
Yeah. Well, sanding all that cedar, I can only imagine. I bet your shop smells wonderful.
Yeah, it is a whole different odor. You go out there, and I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess the question, and I know this is very subjective, but if somebody's really thinking about doing it, how many hours, or break it down into weeks or whatever, and granted, most folks aren't going to do it full time. They're going to be working on it maybe a couple hours in the evening or whatever. What's a realistic estimate of a guy with a life and kids, and, you can't devote his entire being to just building this canoe? What's it going to take most folks to do it in the garage?
Well, to start off, it takes me 300 hours. And I've already got the molds made and the strong back made, so you have to add that into it. Plus, I've done it for a few years.
Sure.
My first canoe took 2 years because I built a double garage in the middle of all of it while I'm working. But, yes, it does. It takes a great deal of time and commitment to an area in your house or your garage that's going to be dirty, unusable during that time.
Yeah.
And you can't roll the canoe out of the way because it needs to be held firmly, otherwise it'll start twisting on you and give you all kinds of problems there. So, I think it would vary. I think with a person working, 8 months would be very feasible.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, what, you've talked about, you put a bead and cove and you plane and all that. What are you think the minimum you could get by with? What did you get by with, the first times you tried to build these?
As far as tools?
Yeah.
Well, the first one I built, I borrowed everything. I borrowed a router. I used somebody else's bandsaw. Mm-hmm. And I had a jigsaw or saber saw. And that's really, other than hand sanding, that's about all I had. I use a ROB, or a random orbital sander, quite thoroughly through the process. I use a belt sander for some of it, and of course a router, and I use a table saw for nothing. Just don't use it.
Really?
Yeah, it would be very difficult for me to run strips through a table saw.
See, and that was my first thought was, just run them through the table saw, but you say the bandsaw works a lot better.
Yeah, with the bandsaw, you just have the front edge of the blade is the cutting surface.
Right.
So if you have any little wiggle, it doesn't. You didn't lose that whole 20-foot strip. When you run it through a table saw, you have 2 cutting surfaces.
Good point.
A little wiggle, you've ruined 2 strips. Now you have to make the next strip you throw away and hope that it's right, and then you start using it. And there's a lot more waste in a table saw.
That's the voice of it. That right there is worth the price of admission for watching our video. That's the voice of experience talking, because that was my thought, is just run them through the table saw.
Yeah.
So bandsaw has to be on my Christmas list when I get ready to do this.
Yeah, and I do have a wonderful planer, but I don't use it for that. I just they do such a good job through the bandsaw. And there's a lot of sanding anyway.
Yeah.
It's softwood. By the time you're done, you'll be fine just doing it by hand.
So lumber prices are pretty expensive now.
Yeah.
You got to add in the fiberglass. Roughly, what do raw materials cost to build, say, a 16-foot boat?
You'll have about $2,000 of material if you buy the planks and you do your own stripping. Around $2,000. That's including your epoxy, your plywood for your forms, and everything else.
So if somebody really was going to do this, you said get a book. Is there groups that meet? And, is there like a Cedar Strip Canoe Club or anything around?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
But anybody that was interested in, they could email me, and I have a list of books that I'd be glad to give them. I mean, I'm not the books, but the list.
Sure, exactly.
Yeah.
So I guess I got to ask, John, do you have any fiberglass canoes?
Well, I've got my wood canoes. I got 3 of them, yeah.
But no fiberglass canoe, no Kevlar or any of that cool stuff?
No, I don't.
Yeah, what is the average weight for, say, a 16 or 17-foot boat?
My 17-footers normally come in at 57 pounds.
That's not bad.
No, and I have 7 models. My 14-footer will come in at 40 pounds. So it's a solo.
Yeah.
And I have a 15-foot model that I haven't made yet. I'm hoping to make it as a solo, but it could be a tandem as well. It's going to be a wide, I'll call it a fisherman's solo because it's a wide, stable canoe.
Exactly. So where have your canoes ended up? I'm obviously central Indiana, a lot of buyers, but I'm guessing you probably have buyers from all over the place.
Well, I have one in the Ozarks. I've got the one that's here at the show is going to Vermont. The rest of them are in Indiana.
Okay.
Yeah, as far as I know.
Yeah. So if somebody is interested in seeing one of your canoes or maybe buying one, how can they get a hold of you?
Well, vanhalcanoes.com is my website.
Okay.
They can call me at home. That number's also listed on that website. Or visit me at Mooresville, Indiana at 3800 Hunter's Ridge.
Gave the address to the shop so they can come by and see us. So, well, that's great. You got some beautiful canoes. I would love to own one, but I'll probably try and build one of these days, and then I'll just throw it all in the trash and call you and buy one. So I may take you up on the offer of a little bit of advice because I'll certainly need it. End up probably stapling my hand to the form or, getting fiberglass over it. So anyway, we've been talking to John Van Hal, Van Hal Canoes. He makes some of the most beautiful cedar strip boats you would ever see, and he is in the Travel and Tourism Pavilion here at the Ford Indianapolis Boat Sport and Travel Show. So, John, thank you for coming by, and if you'll join us at 3 o'clock, we're going to have some Alaska lumberjacks and some axes. So, given my history with sharp implements, that might go viral. So we will hopefully see you at 3 o'clock.